reply to Jesus, I was remembering in a time as I was at the hospital, Ray Craddock was there, and Gene was with him, and Ray was going to be with the Lord, and I remember the nurse coming in, and she brought in what was Ray's last heartbeat that come off of the monitor, and the nurse asked Gene, said, "Would you like to have this?" This was his last beat of his heart. And I thought to myself, how special to knowing that they got that last heartbeat, and then he was flying to Jesus. So great song, such a wonderful message there. Today we're going to be looking at a message titled, Angels, God's Secret Agents. Many of you remember Miss Margie Crawford. She was just one of the special ladies of our church. We loved Miss Margie, and when she was with us, I remember her telling us one time that the prayer group was meeting, and she told us about being involved in an accident. It happened right in the middle of Winterville, there at the stop light. Evidently there was a car that had run a stoplight, and he ran into her vehicle, turned her car around a little bit. So of course she was shocked. She was in the driver's seat. I think she couldn't open the door, and she said there was this nice person that came to the door and was able to open the jammed door and help her out of the car, and helped her over to the side of the curbing. And as they sat there, Miss Margie remembered that she didn't have her pocketbook with her, and the cell phone and everything was inside. So she told the gentleman, she said, "Well, my pocketbook's in the car." And he said, "Well, I'll retrieve it." And he went back to the car, got her pocketbook, and brought it back to her. And she was reaching in there, going to call some of the family members, let them know that she had been involved in an automobile accident, but she was okay. But she remembered, she said, I didn't thank the fellow for helping me. So she turned to look, and she said there was no one there. And Margie said there was no doubt that particular person that had helped her that particular day was an angel in disguise. Author Scott McKnight writes in his book, The Hum of Angels, "I was visiting a bird supply store when I mentioned to the owner that my wife and I had owned a hummingbird feeder, but we'd never once seen a hummer at the feeder. So we tossed it out. We concluded that there weren't any hummingbirds near our home. The shop owner asked where we lived, and I told him, and he said, they are there. Not only do some of your neighbors have hummers in their feeders, but hummers are all over the village that you live in." And he goes on to say what he said next just blew me away. "You just have to have eyes to see them. Once you do, you're going to see hummers everywhere. They're small, they're fast, they're camouflaged, but they're not hard to spot once you have eyes for them." Eventually, we bought a new feeder. We filled it up and waited until our eyes got accustomed to the sight of hummers. And he goes on to say, now we see them everywhere. But when we go with walk from people that are on a walk with us and we observe a hummer, it's very rare that our friends are able to spot the hummers. It takes experience. You need to learn to spot them out of the side of your eye and acclimate to their habits of zooming and darting and taking shelter on obscure branches or even telephone lines. But he said, once you've spotted a hummer, you'll see them everywhere because they're all over the place. The same could be said of angels. They too are all around us. Few of us have perhaps maybe actually seen one or know that we were looking at one. In a good book on angels, Martin Israel was quoting a friend one time as saying, "Eternity lies all around us, and only a veil prevents us from seeing it. The hum of angels surrounds us, and we only need the ears to hear or the eyes to see them, or perhaps maybe a special sense of who they are and where they are." The Bible tells us in Hebrews chapter 13, the writer says, "Do not forget to entertain strangers, for Thereby, some have entertained angels unaware. Angels are mentioned in 34 books of the Bible for a total of 273 times. 108 times in the Old Testament, 165 times in the New Testament. And angels are everywhere. They are special beings created by God for the purpose of worshiping God, glorifying God, carrying out heavenly tasks for God and the wishes of God the Father. Billy Graham once said in his book on angels, he said, yes, angels are real. They are not just a product of your imagination. If we had and were able to open our spiritual eyes, we would see a world of both evil spirits and powers and also powerful angels with drawn swords setting for our defense. And he goes on to say, God's invisible host are better organized than any armies of men. Angels think, they feel, they have a will, and they display emotions. Angels guide, they comfort, they provide for people in the midst of suffering and in persecutions. And Billy Graham said at death, the angels are the faithful ones that usher the believers into the presence of God. What a great thought that is, that as a believer, when we pass from this world, that we're going to be ushered into the presence of God by these heavenly, these wonderful, these beautiful beings. And what I want to do is introduce you a little bit to the spiritual world of angels today, because Daniel, they're going to become very active in his predicament. Last week, you remember, Daniel was thrown into the den of lions by trickery here from some of the co-regents there of King Darius's Persian Empire. The king was upset for himself by not being sharp enough, aware enough that these managers were in cahoots against Daniel. And they had tricked him into signing a decree, and this decree could not be rescinded even by the king. And unfortunately, it was going to target Daniel. And that's where we pick up our passage today as we continue to look expositorily into the book of Daniel. And I want you to see first the dilemma. Then a stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with a signet ring and with the signet of his lords, that the purpose concerning Daniel might not be changed. Now the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting, and no musicians were brought in before him. Also his sleep went from him. It's interesting here, we're looking at the protocol here. It's being carried out. And what they're doing is they're bringing this stone, they're putting it over the mouth of the den, or perhaps maybe over that entrance there. The king seals it with his signet ring, which gives it the official lockdown, and this was to ensure that no effort could be made to change the decree, circumvent the decree. Not even the king was able to do anything at this particular point to intervene on Daniel's behalf. And they were going to have to wait until the time had expired before they could remove the stone. We're told here that the king returns to the palace. He spent the night so upset that he couldn't eat. Have you ever worried a little bit about something and you're so worried about it, you don't even really want to eat? You're a little bit nervous. You're a little bit anxious. Well, this is what's taking place here with King Darius here. He doesn't have an appetite. One commentator thought, well, maybe the king was spending some time praying to his own pagan god on Daniel's behalf, but that's really not likely, simply because he tells the musician, I don't even want you to come and play. Just want to be left alone. And so the king there, with all of this on him, don't even want to hear the music played. You see, the king was more worried than he was religious. Walter Kelly gives us a description of what worry is, and see if this defines worry in your own mind. He said, worry is faith in the negative. It is trust in the unpleasant. It is the assurance of disaster and belief in defeat. Worry is wasting today's time, cluttering up tomorrow's opportunities, worried about yesterday's troubles. He goes on to say, it's really interesting, a dense fog that will cover a 7-city block area, 100 feet deep, is composed of less than 1 glass of water, divided into 60,000 million drops. And it says so much water or so little water there can actually cripple an entire city. Have you ever thought about that? Fog that rolls in is made up of that moisture, and 1 glass can fill up 7 city blocks, just a fog, and paralyze it, can cripple us. And he says that's exactly the way worry is. Some people have such a propensity to worry. When they don't have anything to worry about, they're worried about that. So hopefully that's not you, where you're worried because there's nothing to worry about. But sometimes that's exactly the way life is. But I want you to see the dilemma. The king is worried. He's upset. He's concerned for Daniel. He knows that he's been taken advantage of. He knows there's nothing in the world that he can do. In church, I want you to know sometimes you're going to be in situations in your own life there's nothing you can do personally. The only thing you can do is worry. But that's not really the only thing you can do, is it? Because we can always pray. And we should. Because you see, that's where God comes in, and that's where he specializes. When there's nothing else that we can do, we have to turn loose and we have to give it to God. And it's much the case here with Daniel. He's in a dilemma. The king is in a dilemma. And there's nothing that they can do but just hope and pray that God is going to show up. But I want you to see the response, because when we do pray, when we do actively engage God, God is already aware of our situation. And it tells us, then the king arose very early in the morning, and he went in haste to the den of lions. And when he came to the den, he cried out with a lamenting voice to Daniel. And the king spoke to Daniel, and he said, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God been the one that you serve continually? Has he been able to deliver you from the lions? It's really kind of interesting here. The king doesn't wait for the royal court to come in there and wake him up and carry him down there and give him news concerning Daniel's fate. He gets up early. He takes off. He heads down there to the lion's den himself. And in verse 20, we're told here that the king cries out in a lamenting voice. I mean, he was concerned. He was worried. He wasn't sure. And I'm sure I'm not doing justice to it. But as he comes, he says, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, the one that you serve continually, has he been able to deliver you from the lions? The king was hoping for a response. But it wasn't a sure thing. He didn't know. He hoped for a hopeful response, but it would have been unexpected. But I want you to see what happens next. Daniel says, "O king, live forever." Well, you and I know that's just an official greeting. That's what they would say to kings, even to some of the pagans' kings. We know that they're not going to live forever unless they've got a relationship with God. But it was a polite way for Daniel to say, "King, I want you to know, my God He sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths so that they haven't hurt me. It's really kind of interesting because Daniel didn't even have a scratch on him. They haven't hurt me. Now, I read this, and I had a lot of questions. I don't know about you, but when I read the Bible, I start, maybe my imagination kind of runs away with me just a little bit, but it raised an important question that I had in my own mind that the text doesn't answer. The angel that God sent, was it actually an angel, a mighty angel, or was it Jesus, the angel of the Lord? Because in the Old Testament, occasionally Jesus would appear, and it's called a Christophany when that occurs. We don't know. It doesn't really tell us. But the other question that I had, I wonder if the angel engaged Daniel in conversation during the night just to kind of keep him company. Because you can imagine Daniel was probably a little nervous. I mean, if you were in a den of lions, wouldn't you kind of be a little nervous? Don't really want to go to sleep. You can kind of keep at least one eye open. Wouldn't it be nice to have somebody talking to you? So I was wondering if the angel kind of kept Daniel sort of engaged in conversation, or whether he just prevented the lions from having Daniel as a snack. Was Daniel able to pet the lions? Have you never thought about that? I'm the only one. Or did the angel just kind of keep them separated? You know, hey, lions, you over here. Daniel, you stay over here. We don't know. It's going to be interesting when we get to heaven. Maybe we'll ask Daniel, say, man, what was it like? What we do know is what Daniel's testimony shares with us. The angels haven't hurt me. I mean, the lions haven't hurt me. Daniel goes on to let the king know that he was innocent also before God of the accusations that these fellows had sent his way. And of course, the king's response in verse 23 is one of absolute joy. He commands that Daniel be taken now out of the lion's den. And it says, so Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no injury whatsoever was found on him. But I don't want you to miss this part here, because it says, because he believed in his God. Faith in God had gotten him into that situation where people were jealous of him, but it's also the same faith had gotten him out of trouble because the angel had come to protect him. I believe you and I have a guardian angel that watches over us. I remember Billy Graham being asked that question one time, and he said he believed in guardian angels. Now, I know some people that need guardian angels. And if you have a guardian angel assigned to you, you may be overworking them. Be real careful about that. You don't want them to get exasperated with you, but I do believe that God has angels, and perhaps Daniel had his angel, and it said here because he believed in his God. Daniel didn't have as much as a scratch. Look, I've had my dog to jump on me after being at the groomer and leave scratches on my legs and my arms just trying to love on me a little bit. Daniel didn't even have a scratch at all. Really kind of interesting also, those of you that study the Bible and know the Bible very well, you know in Hebrews chapter 11, it's called the chapter of faith. We get heroes of the faith. Did you know that Daniel is mentioned in chapter 11, heroes of the faith? Verse 23, it makes reference to the faith of Daniel. It says, he or who through faith subdued kingdoms. Speaking of Daniel, remember he worked for the Babylonian kingdom. Now he's working with the Persian kingdom. He worked righteously, Daniel. Obtained promises, Daniel. And stopped the mouths of lions, Daniel. It was all Daniel's faith there. You see, sometimes our faith activates the work of angels in our lives. And so we must remain faithful. We must be continually engaged in our worship of God, Jesus Christ. Green Bay Packers head coach Mike Holmgren, he looks back at a very heartbreaking moment in his life when he was cut from the New York Jets. He was the backup quarterback to Joe Namath. And he goes on to say that it was because God had a bigger plan in place. He said, I committed myself and my life to Jesus Christ when I was but 11 years old. But my pursuit in life to make a name for myself in football, I just left God and I left the Bible that was dust covered. But he says after getting cut from the Jets, he said, I pulled out my Bible once again. And he said, I found comfort in a scripture verse that I'd memorized in Sunday school. You know it very well in Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart and lean not into your own understanding. In all of the ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct your path. And what head coach Mike Holmgren said, I then asked Jesus Christ to take control of my life again. And he said, now my priorities are faith, family, and football. He said, that's the order now. Church, I want you to understand, when you prioritize Jesus Christ in your life and God in your life, you're going to find that the order is going to work much better and certainly in your benefit. There are angels that watch over you, care for you as a believer. And they're going to protect you as well. Plus we have the assurance of heaven. But I want you to see the final thing. There is a judgment that does fall and does come. And the king gave the command, and they brought those men who had accused Daniel. And I almost want to say, well, you need to be real careful here. This is PG 13 or whatever it is, because this gets into where you if I could ask you to close your eyes. In verse 24, it says, they brought them and their children and their wives, and the lions overpowered them. They broke all of their bones into pieces before they even came and hit the bottom of the den. We read that and we say, oh my goodness, that sounds horrible. That sounds real bad. Let me remind you of something here. The king was not to be trifled with. Remember, he didn't sleep any of the night before. He had already been suffering from anxiety over Daniel. He hadn't eaten anything in perhaps maybe the last 12 to 24 hours. He knows that they had intentionally lied it to him and deceived him, and he was tricked to use his authority and his office for unjust means. And so the king was really, really upset. And so the king gave the command, and they brought those men and those accused Daniel, cast them into the den of lions. Their children, their wives, and the lions overpowered them. And we're told that broke all of their bones before they even hit the bottom of the den. You see, I want you to see what's really happening here is this entire family of these wicked conspirators. They were destroyed because of their selfishness, their jealous actions. And not only did they forfeit their lives, they forfeited the lives of their family members. And we look at that and we say, well, why would that be the case? And the reason that is the case here is simply because it was going to be as if they had never existed. You see, their existence was being wiped off the face of history. There would be no legacy for them in the future. And Daniel says here, the lions overpowered them, broke all of their bones, even before they hit the bottom of the floor. Not only was the king hungry, you can see the lions were hungry as well. And so there is a judgment that takes place. And we have to understand, do we serve a good God? Yes. Do we serve a loving God? Yes. But if God is to be good and God is to be loving, He also must be a God of judgment. He must punish the wicked. I want to close today's message with a true story. It was the first day of class. Dr. R.C. Sproul, he had 250 college freshmen in his class, and what he carefully did the very first day was to explain to each one of them that there was going to be a term paper due over the next 3 months. Each paper was due the last day of September, the last day of October, and the last day of November. And Sproul clearly told them that there would be no extension. The only exception would be for a medical reason. So at the end of September, there were some 225 students that dutifully turned in their paper, while 25 remorseful students quaked in fear and said, "Oh, we're so sorry. We didn't get the assignment done. It was so tough. We're trying to adjust from high school to college, and we're so sorry we didn't get it done. And we promise we're going to do better next time." And so Dr. Sproul, he bowed to their pleas for mercy. He gave them extension, and then he warned. He said, "Don't be late next month. Make sure you have it in on time." Well, the end of October rolled around, and there were about 200 students that turned in their papers. There were 50 that showed up empty-handed. "Oh, please, Dr. Sproul. It was homecoming weekend. We got busy. We ran out of time." And again, Dr. Sproul relented, and once more he warned them. He said, "Well, this is it. No excuses next time. You will get an F." The end of November came, and only 100 students turned in their papers. The rest told Dr. Sproul, "We'll get it in soon." Dr. Sproul said, "No, it's too late. You get an F." And the students protested, "That's not fair." Dr. Sproul looked at him and he said, "Oh, so you want justice then?" "Yeah, that's not fair." He said, "You get 3 Fs. If you want justice, remember that was the rule I told you beginning of September, October, November. That was the instructions." The students had quickly taken for granted the mercy that he had given. And Dr. Sproul later reflected, they assumed when justice suddenly fell that they were going to get it again. They were unprepared for judgment. It shouldn't have come as a shock, but they were outraged. Church,